Hey there, Jeep fans, flat fender fanatics, convoy crazies, and jerry can junkies. Johnny here, coming at you from State College, dreary Pennsylvania. And upon request, I'm going to talk a little bit about the old girl here. What is this thing? Well, it is a replica of a G503 quarter-ton reconnaissance car. And the body's homemade. That's right. Every panel you see here, I made. The tub, I made the tub. Now the seats, the combat wheels, the tires, they were part of the barn find where I found that M100 trailer. So there was a collector, he passed away. The estate hired a scrap company to come in and clear the whole thing out, and that was a heartbreaking event because they were taking these Jeeps with the skid steer and putting them in a roll-off, and down the road they went. I didn't have the money or the space to save everything, but what I did save was the M100, 2 seat frames. The passenger seat frame in this thing is an F-script frame. The seats had the canvas on them, and I saved about 10 combat rims, and five of which were mounted with brand new McCreary non-directionals, and I assume that these are from the 80s. They were mounted, they all had air in them, and these tires got me to San Francisco and back. So I have about 6,500 miles on these tires. Let's take a look at the wear. We're down below 50%, but these still have a lot of life left in them. The chassis, let's talk about the chassis. The chassis is a 1993 S10 Blazer, 4-wheel drive, and it had the, I don't know if you guys know anything about Chevys, but that era of small trucks, the S10, early 90s, well even up to 2003 I think was the last year of the S10. They had the independent front suspension on the trucks, and they had the center carrier with the CV shafts that go out to the spindles and the hub bearing assemblies. So that bound me widthwise on the chassis. So this girl is about 9 inches wider than an MB or a GPW, and 4.5 inches of that is in the grill, and the other 4.5 inches of that is in the fenders. And so I made this grill. This started out as a flat sheet of sheet metal. I made dies to bend these louvers. So I laid it all out on the sheet metal with a Sharpie. Center punched and drilled these holes with a hole saw. All these holes, actually these ones here. The short ones at the ends, I'll talk about them in a second. So I drilled them, slit them with a cutoff wheel, and then I got my jig in there with C-clamps and bent these louvers over. Worked really well. Out here, I didn't have room to get my jig in there to bend these, of course, because it was a two-sided deal here. What I did is I cut out a separate louver, shorter louver, bent that, cut it in half, and tigged the whole thing in here so it looks like one stamped assembly. These were cut out, bent the lip over with a pair of pliers, and tigged this recess in. The blackout light holes, they are, sorry, I got a battery indicator on my phone, told me I have 10% battery left. Bent these out with cut these out and bent them over a little bit with a pair of pliers as well. You can see they're just a little bit bent in there, and had these light assemblies from a trailer, but I like the way they look, so I took my 1157 turn signal housings from the S10, put them in there. So there's my markers, my turn signals. The headlights are 5 3/4 inch headlights, made for a Harley. They're made to mount right side up. Well, I mounted these upside down, and so I had to cut a notch in the ring because the ring locates the bulb assembly. They're not sealed beams. They have like a H3 bulb in them, high and low beam. And let's look under the hood here. So the entire chassis of this vehicle is from the 93 S10. And if we look in here, you can see down here, well, let's see if we can get in there. There's my original motor mount. Let's see if I can, yeah, here's my original motor mount. So the engine got set back about a foot because here's the modified motor mounts. So the whole engine got set back a foot so I could get the grill close to where I wanted it. If you look at a profile picture of an MB or a GPW, the grill sits pretty much in line with the leading edge of the rim. So you have about that much setback. And that's really what I wanted, but I just couldn't get that out of this. I couldn't get the engine and everything back far enough to do that. So that's what I settled on the profile. Another thing that gives this away when you look at it, besides the chassis that's sitting on, is the length in the rear. And I couldn't get it short enough, because you see on a real one, your back corner is somewhere right in around here. They're really, really short in the rear, and I couldn't quite get that because the leaf springs on the S10 are so long. My perches are all the way, you can see them from the back. There's my spring perch right there. Just couldn't get it short enough. So I did what I could. The bumperettes I made out of oil tank steel, and they're made to crumple. And the front bumper gussets I made to crumple as well. And you can see I didn't repair this damage from Coraopolis, Pennsylvania. These crumpled when I hit Lanny, that Willys wagon, when I got pushed into Lanny. These did exactly what they were designed to do, what I designed them to do. I made them out of sheet steel, oil tank steel, and look at how that folded back on itself. I love that damage. That's battle damage. And my front bumper is a piece of 4-inch structural channel, like a W channel. And it bent that when I got pushed into them. Didn't bend the frame or anything, but speaking of the frame, I took about 2 feet out of this frame. Had to make a custom torsion bar cross member. It's one of the first things that my dad and I did. My dad got me up to the body and I took over and did the rest of the body. Welded up a custom torsion bar key cross member where the torsion bar keys go in. That's pretty much, right about right in here, about halfway back on the vehicle. My drive shaft, my rear drive shaft is a custom shaft that we welded up. We have the lathe, the whole 9 yards, and I'm a certified welder, so the drive shaft's about 10 inches center to center, 10, 11 inches center to center. It's a really short drive shaft. I would like to fab up a CV shaft for it, just so I can get a little more travel out of it, because whenever I hit a bump and the ass end comes up in the air and unloads, I can feel those universal joints kind of bind up a little bit. So the steering column's all homemade. This is a piece of DOM roll cage tubing. The original shaft is inside it, made bushings and stuff. The original shaft from the S10, I should say. So that's that. The steering wheel came out of a Huber Road Maintainer grater. And I liked the way that looked. Had it laying in a junk pile, put her in there. The handbrake assembly, it's a ratcheting kind, came out of a Tri-5 Chevy, 55, 6 or 7 Chevy. If you guys out there that have a Tri-5, you'll be able to recognize that. The gauges I bought from Autometer, they're the old time black series, I believe is what they're called. And yeah, these are my indicators here. This is my charging indicator, like you'd see in your vehicle. High beam indicator. This is my check engine light. So this is OBD1. This has a computer from the 93. It has everything in it. Whenever I get a trouble code, this will come on. And then in the old OBD1 vehicles, you used to have to run a jumper on the test pack underneath. Well, I took that and I just wired a switch in. So with the key off, the ignition off, I turn the switch in under the dash, turn the key on, and then it goes into diagnostic mode and it shows me what codes that's throwing. So the back seat, that's out of a 63 Chevy Suburban carry-all kind of vehicle that Dad used to have. He called it the orange peeler. And they're known, they have an eyebrow above the windshield and they're known to rot out, and it started to rot out and he didn't want to save it. But that bench seat used to be in his hot rod, and he gave it to me, and wouldn't you know it, that's the passenger side of the front seat. It had a split 60-40 bench seat in it. That's the passenger side out of a 63 Suburban. And it in my tub perfectly. I didn't have to shorten it or narrow it or anything. I shortened the back. I dropped the back to make it look like an MB GPW seat. The toolbox lids. These are homemade. You can see in here. These are hinges I bought at Lowe's. They're those pocket hinges or hidden hinges. And the toolbox lids are pieces of sheet metal that I cut. And they have quarter-inch brake tubing TIG welded around the outside. And when I welded it, this is actually really cool. I didn't expect this to happen. When I welded it and as it cooled, it bowed that sheet metal a little bit. So they're kind of convex. The lids are convex, and that worked out wonderfully. Just bits and pieces I found in antique shops and flea markets. Like the fire extinguisher bracket, that was in an antique shop for like $5 or $10. The shovel was laying around, and I had to modify the shovel. This is a different shovel, but the shovel I used to have on there that I broke, I had to take a torch to it right here and bend it a little bit more, because you know those World War II shovels are really, really steep angled, and the modern shovels aren't as steep, so I had to modify that. So if you have an MB or GPW and you're like, oh man, I don't want to spend, what are they, $80 now on a shovel, just get yourself a shovel, get the torch to it, and bend that head. It's going to take a little bit of work, and you might have to put it in something to bend it, but you can do it. The axe is another flea market find. It was like $4. It's one of those square-headed, I think that's a True Temper. The axe pocket, I bought that and welded it in. The footman loops, I got it like Tractor Supply, something like that. These reflectors, I got at, I think, Tractor Supply. Took a hole saw to the back of them, so they're relieved in the back, and these are my marker lights. So they come on when I turn the headlights on. Yeah, made mounts inside the toolboxes. That's where them lights are. These are Model A reproduction tail light assemblies, stainless steel, and they look a lot like the driving lamp for the driver's side of the MB. And I said, well, that's not going to work. I need stops and turns. So I got two and wired them up for my brake lights and turn signals. Yeah, spare tire mounts, homemade. It works. It's not a real one, but it works. And it gets me down the road. Canvas. I got this canvas out of a surplus store near Fort Bragg, and did all the sewing on an old Husqvarna industrial machine. I did the cover for the trailer first to get my bearings and figure out how to sew this material, and then that's another thing I found in the barn find was a reproduction top for a real Jeep, and it was rotted and shot, but I used it as a template to make this canvas top. That's about it. Homemade vehicle. And don't let anybody tell you you can't do something. I tell everyone when I talk about this, you're only bound by how badly you want something in life. And I've wanted a Jeep ever since I was a kid, so that's the Warhorse in a nutshell. A couple more things I want to do. I got to get some grab handles on it, and I got to get a glove box made for it. So I have it marked out. I just got to cut it out, fab up a glove box, and I'll probably make the lid a lot like I made these toolbox lids. Sheet metal with the brake line around it. Yep, four-wheel drive, discs in the front, drums in the rear, and well, here she is. See you out there. Thanks for watching.